as many of you all know, Washington, D.C.'s got a lengthy and robust history. There are certain things that we do at Rotary, like plant trees and do things in town with pollinator gardens. Well, Steve gets out there and he hits the pavement and shows us what this all came from, how it was all put together, and really is part of the fabric of the District of Columbia and its rich history. So without further ado, my friend Stephen Powers.
How did I get into the stones? I'm going to say that before I put this up. So I'm a civil engineer. I work for Washington Metro, and I love Washington, D.C. history. I knew of the boundary stones. My daughter, when her and my son were first born, I took them all around D.C. to the 200 donkey and elephant statues, and I took a photo album, made a photo album of them. Then I did that for the pandas, 150. I had these wonderful photo albums of my two kids. So when my daughter was in second grade at an Arlington school, she had a trivia project come in with a tidbit about Arlington. And I said, well, let's tell them Arlington used to be part of Washington, D.C. I know where a couple of the boundary stones are. We'll take you over there, we'll take your picture, and we'll make a nice presentation. When I started taking pictures of my kids at the boundary stone, I was like, wow, well, there's got to be more. And I figured out there's 40 of them. So I wanted to make an album of my children at all 40 stones. One thing led to another, and that introduced me to a club called NACABOSTCO, the Nation's Capital Boundary Stones Committee, the first two letters of that word. And I then became really infatuated with the group and what they were doing. I'm kind of an impatient guy, so after going to a lot of these meetings, I challenged the chairman, Rick Chairman. I said, nobody does anything. You know, we're working policy and we're not doing anything. We're talking about it. And he looked at me and he said, well, what about you? I put this all together. We have 35 different groups and stakeholder clubs. ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, was on this board. They stopped coming. You're a civil engineer. What about you? And I said, he's right. You know, what about me? So I called ASCE National Capital Section. I said, you know, I'm Stephen Powers and I got all this stuff. And, you know, can I represent you on your club? Yes, please represent us on NACABOSTCO. So I then went to ASCE and I said, we need to do something. So we, in 2012 to 2015, we fixed 22 of the fences and put 3 of the fences back up of the sites. And I won't get into a lot of that. This presentation is usually an hour long, 20 minutes on the history, 20 minutes on the preservation, 20 minutes on the current status. Really truncated that today, so I'm going to be moving at a quick pace to kind of go through all of this. And I'll just jump back to 1790, the Residence Act of Washington, D.C., which created the 10-mile square and allowed George Washington to put a 10-mile square somewhere along the Potomac River, was the start of Washington, D.C. George wanted it in this area because he owned a lot of land. And also there were already 2 established ports, Old Town and Georgetown. So that's why the square got oriented to where it was. One of the stipulations of the Residence Act was no federal money would go to the Virginia side of the Potomac because Washington owned a lot of land and stuff over there, and Congress did not want him to benefit from it. So that comes into play a little bit more as I move through this. So this is a map of what DC looked at the time. Bladensburg Road was there. That was the original one of the original roads. It's where the British, when they came in 1812, marched down and burned the White House. Thomas Jefferson was the Secretary of State. It was his job to hire Andrew Ellicott of Ellicott City, Maryland, who was a very prominent colonial surveyor who actually laid out parts of 11 different states, the boundaries of them. It started in February of 1791. It took him 34 days to lay out the 40 miles. And that started down at Jones Point in Alexandria, where now the lighthouse is. And he had hired Benjamin Banneker, who was a freed African-American at the time. Banneker was an astronomer and a mathematician. He was a very knowledgeable man. He laid on his back for 6 nights and did the astronomical survey to determine the original point. So what that is a triangulation. You take 2 stars, make a triangle, you get the point on the ground. That's how they got benchmarks and new grade above sea level back in colonial times. They don't have to do that anymore because we have so many benchmarks that we know where the grades are. So 34 days to do the line. It was finished in March. They had the opening ceremony on April 15th, 1791. They left from Gadsby's Tavern in Old Town, and they marched down to the stone. Masonic temple, Masonic ceremony with oil, wine, and corn on top of the stone. It was, for the next 18 months, it was a logging party. So they cleared 20 feet on either side of the line, 40-foot swath all the way around, and they put the stones in place. The stones in Virginia are all dated 1791. The stones in Maryland, 1792. So that it took them 18 months. The final report was given back to Jefferson on January 1st, 1793. The stones themselves, 4 sides, they're 4 feet in height, 2-foot uncut stone in the ground, 2 foot above the ground on each side. Maryland or Virginia on that side of the stone, 1790. The date on another side. The reading of magnetic north of the compass at that time, that has changed over time. Magnetic north moves, so it's not accurate anymore. And then on the DC side, because they had not named it yet, it's still the Columbia Territory and different names, the federal city. They put jurisdiction of the United States. These are the oldest monuments purchased by the United States government, and if not the first, one of the first times the words United States was carved into stone. So 4 cornerstones, and on each 10-mile leg, 1 mile apart, 9 stones. So then each of the stones was labeled miles 1 through 9, as they run around. Some of them, if it was in a creek bed or a low point, Ellicott moved them up to the higher ground, and those stones actually will have like 8 poles, where that was the distance for surveying. There would be the number of poles from where the mile marker should have been. So there's a couple of the stones that actually have that designation on it. The stones themselves came from Aquia Creek quarry, which Pierre Lafont purchased the quarry on behalf of the government. It's down in Stafford, Virginia now. Aquia Creek, it comes right up off the Potomac. It was a sandstone quarry, which was a nice soft stone. It was easy to pickaxe and cut, easy to put on the sloops, which were the barges of the time, and they would ship it right up to DC and right to the work sites there. The Capitol, the White House, were buildings that were built with it. At the time, Tiger Creek was there, where the canal eventually came and became Connecticut Avenue. So they were able to take this stone and put it right where they needed it. Representations of the stone today, for those of you who are on Constitution Avenue and 15th Street, you'll see the Capitol, the columns there in the lower left-hand corner where the White House or where the Washington Monument is. You also see in the center the gatekeeper's house. That's on the ellipse side of the intersection of 15th and Constitution. If you go out to the Arboretum, you'll see the Capitol columns. Those are all Aquia Creek sandstone as well. And if you go into the Rotunda, that is all polished Aquia Creek sandstone. Now, the bad thing about that nice soft sandstone, it didn't hold up over time. It was subject to cracks and fissions. Water gets in it and it pops. And you'll see some of that in the pictures as we move on. The quarry today is a Stafford County park. It's called Government Island. I encourage you to go down there. It's a great, you see there in the picture of me standing next to the quarry. You can see actually pickaxe marks in the stone right there. And you can see the representative orange colors that it is distinctive of it. Ellicott, as I said, January 1st, 1793, did his final report and turned in the 10-mile square. If you're so inclined, go online, pull up that map. It's a beautiful map. All the contours, very, very accurate. And Ellicott's surveying is spot on. So that kind of gets us into the preservation effort. So the stones sat for about 100 years. Nobody did anything with them. The big change was in 1847 when the country was, slavery was coming up. There was a lot of things going on. The Civil War was coming. Washington, D.C. was a free city. Virginia was not. It was a slave state. There was an active slave market in Old Town. And Old Town, Alexandria, was pretty upset in that they could not get taxes or money from D.C. because of the Residence Act, no money. And they couldn't get it from Virginia because they weren't part of Virginia. So in almost a unanimous vote, the Retrocession Act, only 3 dissenting votes in Congress, gave the Virginia lands back to Virginia. And that is why Arlington County is the smallest county in America at 23 square miles. And Alexandria City is down at the lower part of it. So there are actually 4 stones that when you go to them, the first 4 stones in the presentation I'm going to show you, no matter what side you're on them, you're in Alexandria City. They no longer designated boundary. Everything else is between Arlington County, McLean, Falls Church, and of course DC, Maryland on this side. So what happened? 1891, city was celebrating its centennial birthday. The surveyor of DC was a man by the name of Marcus Baker. He went out and did a transit survey of the stones. This was the first time the stones were documented since Ellicott's time. He was able to find 39 of the 40 stones. The one stone that was missing was over in Virginia by the Masonic Temple, Russell Road. That had been a big, huge Civil War camp, and they figured that's probably when that stone disappeared. Baker's work came to the attention of a man by the name of Fred Woodward. Woodward was the bookstore department manager at his brother's department store, Woodward and Lothar, and Woody's to all the locals. And Fred got what we call Stones fever. Those of us that have Stones fever. Fred really got it. So he went by horse and buggy, and he went around and did his own survey, which led to some problems. And did 3 journals, 3 stories for the Columbia Historical Society. Those articles got a lot of attention. One of the people they got attention of was a man by the name of Ernest Schuster, who worked for National Geographic. And in the April 1908 edition of National Geographic, he did a story on the boundary stone. So that was, now they were getting some real attention. So again, Fred Woodward, the godfather of the preservation effort for the boundary stones, he inspired a lot of people. He wrote some journals. When I did some of what I did John Kelly from the Washington Post, the Answer Man in the old style, wrote an article about me. It came to the attention of a man by the name of Albert Small, who was a developer here in DC. His father actually built the first strip mall over in Cleveland Park. Mr. Small said, "Come to my office, I have something you want to see." Albert Small was a collector of Washingtonian images, documents, art, anything to do with Washington. Huge collection. When I got to his office in Bethesda, he said, "I was in New York in the 1930s. I was up in this bookstore, and this book inspired me my whole collection. It's the first thing I ever got." And it was Fred Woodward's journal. And so when I went through Woodward's journal, I realized that what I did was exactly what Woodward did, but I did it really 100 years to the day later. And I was doing it with modern car and digital photography, where he was using black and white photography and horse and buggy. But his journals and my journals, it was very, very, very moving to go through some of that stuff. Mr. Small has since passed away. His collection has been donated to UVA and to GW. If you go to the Textile Museum over at GW, they have a room, the Albert Small room, and in the middle of the room, the central focus is that journal, the Fred Woodward journal. So I encourage you to go see that. Fred inspired the Daughters of the American Revolution. So at the basement of the Woody's building downtown, in October of 1914, he gave a speech to DAR about the boundary stones. And a month later, they decided that they were going to make it their pet project to preserve the stones. And they decided to put fences around all the stones. Now, the first, so these are Schuster's photos, kind of hard to see, but this is from the National Geographic, where you see some from 1908. The one thing you take away from here, how agricultural everything was. A lot of Fred Woodward's writings is bemoaning how development is coming and roads are being built and farms are disappearing and the stones are getting to urbanization. That's why he inspired DAR. So the first fence that was put up is at Northwest number 4 over on Dale Carlia water treatment. And I'll show that stone, but this is a photograph. So July 12, 1915 was when the first fence was put in the ground. This is a picture of that ceremony. The Daughters of the American Revolution, they got grants for easements around the stones, 3 by 3, and to put these fences up. They contracted the Gishner Ironworks Company down here in DC to build these fences. $18 for a fence to go around the stones, $43 for the round fences that went around the cornerstones. Those, if you wanted to buy a fence, you were then given a chapter. It would be like the Stephen Powers chapter of the DAR, and that would be your fence and your stone. So a lot of those chapters were just one person. Other chapters were actually very vibrant chapters that are still in operation today. So they're 3 by 3 by high, and that's how they got those. I'm not going to tell you anything about the 70s and all the preservation. I'm going to fast forward you to NACABOSTCO in the 2000s. So Rick Terman started NACABOSTCO, and that was to who owns the stones. Nobody knew who owns the stones. So NACABOSTCO got lawyers, they did research, they found out that the ownership of the federal government of the stones through the history of all which departments changed over time was DDOT. So the District Department of Transportation owns the Maryland stones. The Virginia stones, since the federal government gave up right to them, there was no owners. If you're the property owner in Virginia, you own a stone. Many of the stones are on property borders, so you own half a stone, your neighbor owns the land. And the fences, now DAR put fences around all of the stones. A lot of those fences have disappeared or been changed, so there's replacement fences. Arlington County has put fences up. So there's many different owners of the fences, but DAR owns most of the fences. The survey itself, though, is owned by the National Geodetic Society. NOAA owns the survey, and they're responsible for doing the survey. David Doyle worked with NOAA. He was a great champion of the stones. I'm going to talk about him when we get into some of the stones. But David and a good man, Chaz Langman, in 1991, the bicentennial of the city, they did a transit study of the boundaries as well, and I'll talk about that as we go through a couple of the stones. A lot of GPS has been done over the time. In 2006, they actually, when GPS was brand new, they went out with satellite trucks and everything. Now you can just go with your phone and do it. So I'm going to take you on a quick. I try not to make this like a family vacation, just showing you slides, but we're going to look at all 40 slides and be real fast on this to keep it moving. So this is where Banneker laid on his back. In 1854, they built the tidal wall, and they buried the stone in the tidal wall. Fred Woodward was very responsible with the lighthouse corps of uncovering that stone, putting that concrete vault that is still around it, and that's how you see the stone now. You go and you actually look. It's in that tidal wall in front of the lighthouse. Now we're up on. These are all the southwest leg through Virginia, from Old Town Alexandria to Falls Church. This one is over by Alexandria Cemetery. It's in someone's front yard. They still haven't figured out the engraving and the size of the stone, so it's a little bigger, squattier, and very small. It also, when they moved it with the road widening, they put it 90 degrees in the wrong orientation. So we're working to try and actually put this in the right orientation. Whenever they do move the stones, they do put them on the line. Number 2, this is the one that was missing by Russell Road in the Masonic Temple. In the 1920s, DAR put a replica stone that's made of Aquia Creek sandstone, but they made it a rectangle so that no one would ever mistake it for an original stone. There is no engraving on this as well. Number 3 is in a church parking lot. One of the parking spaces is actually where the stone is, and it's got bollards around it to protect it from cars, so you can drive right up to this one and just look at it and keep on moving. Number 4, when Woodward went with his horse and buggy, this was a farmland, and he asked the farmer who owned the property, "Where is this stone?" The farmer said, "I know. I hit it with my plow all the time. The only thing that's left of this is a little note." I'd love to work to try and uncover it to see how much of the stone is underground, but there's very little above the ground. Number 5, this one is one of the strangest stones of all. It's on its side and it's misshapen and it's small. There's no engraving on it, but you can tell it's definitely Aquia Creek sandstone. And it sits there down off of Walter Reed Drive and King Street. So if you're thinking coming out of Old Town, you're basically driving along King Street right now. And if there was a Northern Avenue in DC, because you all know there's Eastern, Western, and Southern, Northern Avenue would kind of be where King Street is. Number 6 is on Jefferson Street between Columbia Pike and Route 7 up there in Skyline. It sits in the median. Cool thing about this stone, in the 1960s, Edwin Nye, who was the father of Bill Nye, the science guy, he was a stoner, as we call him, and he did preservation on a couple of these stones and was responsible for making sure that they are with us today. This stone, Edwin Nye did a lot. Edwin also wrote a great article in the Washington Star about the Bangor Stone in the early 60s. Number 7, this one sits by Carlin Springs Elementary School over in Arlington, just shy of Route 50, getting oriented. And you can see the Virginia stones are in pretty bad shape. They sat in the woods and nobody really did anything with them. So a lot of them are in really bad shape. Also, probably the vein of the quarry where they cut that stone from might have been a little softer or whatnot. Number 8 sits up the top of Upton Hill by the water tank up there. For those that know where that's right off of Wilson Boulevard. This stone disappeared for a little while. In the early 90s, they found it in the basement of Arlington Courthouse when they were demolishing the old courthouse to build the new courthouse. Wow. And they were able to put this stone back in the ground. They put it 90 degrees in the wrong way. Our good friend Rick Turman of NACABOSTCO led the charge to make sure that it is oriented properly. So that one is now sits correctly. This one is the only stone that is a National Historic Landmark. So in the 1976, when the Bicentennial of America was going on, they needed to do something for an African American, for Benjamin Banneker. They started with his stone, and it wasn't any good. And as you saw, all those stones weren't in great shape. When they got to this stone, it was already in a park. It was in good shape. They decided this was going to be the Benjamin Banneker stone. That park is now Benjamin Banneker Park. It's behind the East Falls Church Metro Station on Van Buren Street. And this one gets federal funding to take care of it. It's the only one. After this one happened, in the early 1980s, there was a big push by Bill Schaefer of ASCE to try and get them all national landmarks. He took it to the Department of the Interior. And does anyone know who the head of the Department of the Interior was in the 1980s? James Watt. And he said, no, we're not doing it. So that got turned down. And they said at the time, we will never do any of them individually. It has to be all or nothing. And as you can see with land ownership and where these things are, it's going to be hard to get them to that status. But that was one of the goals of NACABOSTCO as well. The West Cornerstone, this is the ideal. It sits in a park in a development. That quarter-acre lot that should have been a house, they made it a park. So when you go over there in East Falls Church, Arlington, there's a nice little park with picnic benches. It's called Andrew Ellicott Park. Now we're making our way from East Falls Church to Silver Spring. This one's in somebody's backyard. This one sits in another backyard, number 3. This one, this is what it looked like before 2017. It's in somebody's backyard. He did, in addition to his house, put a porch. And he did not move the stone. He made sure they did not touch it. They built all around it. So now, and if you look in the windows, it's a bar in there. When you're in his house and you look out, the stone is featured because of that in the boundary stone door. Now we're at Dale Carlia water treatment plant. So these are the Maryland stones now. This one's in great shape. If you can get in touch with the Corps of Engineers and go visit, this one, because the public can't get at it, is in really pristine shape. Probably better than all. It's right next to the water treatment plant itself, just south of MacArthur Boulevard. Is north of MacArthur Boulevard. This is the funnest stone to visit. It's in the middle of the woods by the reservoir. This one's also in great shape. Now these stones, think of Western Avenue. So kind of just real quick. So you see Western Avenue right here in the photo. So Western Avenue is DC. The line is right here. This is Maryland. This one sits in a park over there by Ellicott Street. Number 7 sits in these people's front yard. They took out the fence back in the 40s. They didn't want it. This is near Chevy Chase Circle. Number 8. This one, they built a circular driveway around their stone so they could use their property and still have a driveway. Here you can see what I talked about, the soft stone, how it cracks and pieces of it break off. So in 2015, there was an effort to do a lot of mortar and fix a lot of these stones. Number 9, this one sits on a pipe stem driveway right next to Rock Creek Park, off of Oregon Ave and Beach Drive. Now we're at the North Cornerstone. So this is right off of East-West Highway, just to the west of 16th Street. And it sits down in a riprap ditch. Actually, this stone was raised when I first started seeing it. All you could see was the very top of it because it was down in the sill. So number 1, this is one of the missing stones. There's 4 missing that I talked of. It's now a plaque. It went missing in the 1950s. A dump truck hit it. It was not gone. It's at the Tiramisu Bakery on Eastern Ave, and the plaque sits right at the front door of the Tiramisu Bakery. So this one's in Tacoma Park, Maple Ave, Maple Street. It sits right between an apartment building in DC and a house in Maryland. So number 3 is down by New Hampshire Ave. As we get to Chillin, you can see some of the graffiti that's put on some of these stones. 4 is right by Sargent Road. This one is in great shape. If you want to see a stone that's in pristine shape, this is the one to go see. Number 5, this one, the homeowner in the 90s painted the numbers, and so it pops out. Which preservation is served. Number 6, this stone in 1934, there's a couple articles in the Washington Post about how it went missing. They found it a week later. It actually had been buried by 10 feet of dirt when they were building Eastern Ave and filling the landfill. When they dug out the stone, they found it broken in 2, so it was raised and put back together. So this next one is on Fort Lincoln Cemetery in Bladensburg. So when I first went to see it, it sits in the back along this fence. It's in really bad shape. 2015, DAR did a reconstruction, rehabilitation of the site. They worked with the cemetery, so you see what they did there. And they also fixed the stone. This is the one that brought the preservationists together and made sure we need a better standard of how we're doing it. So DBOT worked with, transferred ownership over to DC SHPO. And Andrew Lewis and his office over there in DC government has taken it, and they're much better stewards of the stone since then. Number 8, this one sits down off of Kenilworth Ave. This senior assisted living care center was just built about 2 years ago. It used to be in Kenilworth Gardens. It was back in the woods. Now it sits right to the other side of this building. Number 9 sits in the front yard of this gentleman's house. He's very proud. He's lived there since 1980. He will come out with a brochure. He's made these hand brochures to give people information. Where Southern Avenue and Eastern Avenue come together is where the East Cornerstone is. This is a beautiful stone. This is a prime site that could become a park like the West Cornerstone. It's unknown who the Maryland people are. We're working on trying to see who owns that. And I'm going to wrap this up really quickly. As we go down Southern Ave, this one sits next to a Jewish cemetery. This one's in someone's front yard. Number 3, this stone is very unique. It's much taller and it's uncut like any of the other stones. I don't know why, but it's a weird shape. Okay, number 4 is one of the missing stones, sort of. So it was found in 1991 by the surveyors that I mentioned when they were doing the transit study. King's Crossing apartment. It had been hit by an 18-wheeler in 1985. The maintenance man took that, put it in the boiler room. He then gave it to David Doyle from NOAA, that I mentioned. It sat in David's house up at Colesville, Maryland for years. He then gave it to the DC surveyor. It was in the DC surveyor's office, in the permit office down at Water Street. You could go and see it there. And then in COVID, 2015, they put a replica stone down at by Naylor Road. The original stone now is at the Capitol's Visitor Center. So if you ever go to the Capitol, the United States Capitol Visitor Center, you'll see this stone in glass with a nice maps and things that talk about it. So number 5 sits at Southern Avenue Metro Station, right at the base of the bus turnaround wall. It's got a stone wall that protects it. Number 6 was in pristine condition until 2008 when a drug dealer being chased by the cops, ran off the road and ran right through it. That's why it got scarred here at the top. And it also got broken perfectly right between the uncut and the cut, so it was easily put right back together, so it didn't get damaged there. And it's back in the ground as well. Number 7, it's down by Oxen Run. It used to be down in the creek. They raised it up. The original location, there's a plaque. It sat here like this until last April. It had a nice concrete cinder block knee wall around it to protect it. April 20th of 2024, somebody ran off the road and smashed right into it. I was called, I went down, I dug it out, so I was able to find it. I called Andrew Lewis. He sent the DDOT guys. They picked up the stone. This stone is currently in storage. And we're going to put it back in the ground, but the line is this chain link fence. We're going to put it further away from the intersection to protect it. Number 8, again, back to my surveyor friends, Chaz Langdon and David Doyle in the 1991 survey. When they got to this one, this stone disappeared in the 1960s when they were building DC Village. They took the stone and the fence, they put them in a warehouse. They put the landfill in, they went back to the warehouse, they found the fence, the stone was gone. It's never been found. So the Daughters of the American Revolution had a replica stone from Macquarie Creek, cut, they put it in the ground, 10 years later they buried it by another 10 feet. So when they got there in 1991, nobody could find it. There was a backhoe operator actually doing the job. Chaz and David convinced him for a case of beer to dig down. They had the surveying of where it should have been. They dug down, they found the fence, they found the replica stone. So they put this piece of pipe on it, and you would look down at it. 2015, next slide, they dug up the replica stone, and they put a new replica stone there. And then it's marked so that no one thinks it's in the interim replica stone now is at the Boundary Stone Pub on Rhode Island Ave. So if you ever go to that pub, you can see that replica stone. This is the final stone. This is down by the banks of the Potomac. In the 60s, this was actually in the river. When they built the berm, they moved it up and they put it on the river side of the berm. So when the river would come up, it would still get flooded. In 2015, they moved it across the berm and put it on the right side. So it now sits like that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was good. As a native Washingtonian and historian, I am fascinated by the subject. I'd love to keep in touch. I had, if I may, just one question which you could answer. How did they determine the 4 original cornerstones, which was the starting point? Because in the Constitution, I believe it says there will be a federal city for 10 miles square. Up to 10, okay. How did they determine that it was going to be oriented this way, that way? It's a diamond.
So That all came off of the South Cornerstone. So once they got that point, Ellicott, because of Huntington Creek that's right there, we stayed on the land. So the beginning of the orientation is actually based because of where Huntington Creek is. And the goal was to go out to East Falls Church, but whether it would have gone like this or this, it actually was oriented off of where that water was going.
All for very practical reasons. Well, very good. This has been great. We have a tradition in our club of planting a tree in the honor of each of our speakers. And not just anywhere, actually on the National Mall or in one of the memorial parks. We've had this partnership with the National Park Service for over 35 years. So as embodying our commitment to you, I give you this certificate. We will plant a tree, and you eventually will get the coordinates once we know who they are. Okay. All right.